Greetings, friends. In this short little video, we want to talk about survey design. There's a lot in here, and so you may want to play this video over several times and refer to it while you're designing your survey. Survey design is critical because you really do need to have good data if you're going to make use of the statistical software that we have. It really doesn't do anybody any good to go through very sophisticated kind of statistical analysis if the questions that you're asking don't give you the kind of data that you need in order to be able to do your analysis. So when you are creating data for analysis in our in the projects or thesis that you're doing, more often than not, you're going to use some kind of self-generated tool or instrument or a survey to do that. So what we're going to do in this video is show you how to construct that survey. Basically, what you're going to do with the survey is collect two different kinds of variables: nominal, sometimes ordinal, mostly nominal variables, which for nominal data like demographic information, gender, ethnicity, so on and so forth. And you will use that as a foundation for a t-test or ANOVA. But then you also use scalable variables, and that's what really takes the time to develop, those scalable variables for attitudinal information, opinions, beliefs, and so on. And you will use those in conjunction with the, you use those for correlations, and also in some instances you'll use those in conjunction with nominal variables for your t-test. Remember, t-test tests have a nominal variable and a scale variable. Well, you'd be able to get the scale variables oftentimes through a survey. So what are nominal variables? On your survey, they're just questions about gender, ethnicity, grade level taught, years of experience, so on and so forth. Anything that has a name, you would use a nominal, you would create a survey where they would give you nominal data to be able to identify what those categories are. We have some very specific ways of identifying ethnic groups, and you should be aware of those. The Department of Education identifies 6 different kinds of ethnic groups that you will see on most surveys. We certainly use those at Fresno Pacific. Those categories are white, Hispanic, American Indian and Alaskan Native, Asian, Black or African American, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, or some other race, and sometimes you'll have a category for more than one race, or more than one ethnicity. You can take a look at this for a more detailed description of what those ethnicities are. Now, but those are rather easy. What's more challenging is to get authentic and usable, scalable information, especially attitudes and dispositions. So what you want to do is you want to be able to capture those variables. And the variables that you're going to use usually will come through your literature review or in your research questions. So what you want to do is, first of all, identify questions that will distinguish between the groups. What dispositions might one group have that another group might not have? And ask questions that will elicit those kind of differences. And we'll give you some examples here in a bit. But usually you want to find out attitudes or dispositions or beliefs about things, about what they think about different questions, what they think about different situations, the people that you're interviewing. And then we're going to perform our statistical analysis to see if there's some kind of relationship. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but basically the relationships you want to see is if those variables, if one variable might cause a change in a different variable, or if it's somehow related to a change in the variable. Most surveys as you probably will have already known or have experienced is the most common kind is a Likert scale. And a Likert scale is usually between 1 and 4. and it gives you choices that are on one end of the spectrum or another. We usually like in Likert scales 1 to 4, not 1 to 5. We don't want a middle number. We want to force people to make a decision. And Likert scales usually have these kind of possible choices. One is always the one that's associated with the more negative answer, and and 4 with a more positive answer. Strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree, and you can see some examples of that here. Another way of doing this is what's called a semantic scale, and that just it doesn't give you the all the variables in between. It just gives you the extremes and allows the person to identify where they are in between. Now, question construction is incredibly important. If you ask a weak question or a question that doesn't elicit the response that you want, it's what we used to call GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So basically what we want to do is construct questions that really will give us authentic and usable data. So as we've said before, differences between groups would be those nominal kinds of questions that you would ask, and you can go ahead and set up a survey that looks something like this for the way that you would put the construction of you would construct the survey. You put the question here, and then give your respondents a way to select a choice on the side. This is a very easy instrument to create. Now, as you're constructing your questions, there are a lot of things to keep in mind. Probably the most common mistake that people make is when they construct a survey that they ask a question that a person can't possibly know the answer to. It would require them to predict the future or to read their mind, read someone's mind. So make sure that when you ask a question, it is something that somebody actually can know the answer to. Our previous text gave a lot of very helpful suggestions about how to construct questions. You make sure that, and here's some of the problems that are normally associated with poor question design. The question is unclear because it's vague or improperly worded. Multiple questions. You put 2, 3, or 4 questions out there at the same time, and the person doesn't know which question to answer. Or the question is too wordy, it's too long. It's always good to state the question positively, because of the way that the scale is worked, you would have to actually, to answer a negative question negatively, you answer positively, and that can mess people up as they're trying to answer the question. So make sure you state the question positively. Avoid using words that are only familiar to you, the researcher. Wouldn't be familiar to everybody in the field. So here's just a couple. You can stop and read these at your leisure and get an idea of some of the problems that can be associated with constructing a survey. At the end, what you want to do is construct the survey, and then you want to validate that survey. And so there's a number of ways of doing that. You can go ahead and check with your program advisor to see how to go about that. Oftentimes, the first kind of validity is face validity, where you just take a look and on the face value, does this look like it's a fair survey? Some people actually give the survey to a couple of individuals first, then ask them if it was clear. So those kind of double checking of your survey before you give it can really help you to make sure you get good data.